This one goes out to anyone who's feeling the desire to shift or pivot your business. In this episode, holistic health coach and mindset mentor Amanda Biccum shares how she pivoted her business from working with women to solely working with men. You're going to learn why it can be more profitable to pivot, how the act of surrendering is actually an active state, and you'll learn Amanda's steps to creating a pivot with ease rather than resistance. Now, before we dive into the episode, I want to mention today's amazing sponsor. It is Conquer Your Bullshit with CPR, which is my free 3-video training series that is guaranteed to help you bring your message to the masses. Head to rubyfremont.com/CPR and sign up today. And finally, whether you're new to this podcast or you are a loyal thought leader, please make sure that you take a moment to drop a rating and review on iTunes because this shit helps. Now it's time to learn what it takes to pivot your business and purpose with Amanda Biccum. Welcome to today's Thought Leader, where I'm challenging you to rise up, speak up, and create a movement. I'm your host, Ruby Fremont, and I'm here as a catalyst for you, the new generation of thought leaders. Join me every week as I dive into raw and real conversations that will help you amplify your presence, influence, and impact. Hey, thought leaders, we are back, and I'm excited for my guest today. Amanda Biccum and I connected at the New Media Summit, which I've mentioned a few times on this podcast, and I just absolutely love her energy. And on top of that, love her journey as of recent, and you're going to find out why. Amanda, welcome to today's Thought Leader. Super stoked to have you here.
Thank you. I'm super stoked to be here. Thank you for having me.
So you have gone through some pretty big changes in your business as of recent. Major pivots. And I feel like there's a lot of people kind of percolating on this right now. And I don't know if it's the energy of the collective, but I feel like there's just a lot of people waking up to what it is that they're really truly meant to do, and not really taking action on it, which I know some of our listeners even right now are probably resonating. So I'm curious. I would actually just love for you to dive in and share exactly what I'm talking about, because I already know this.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I feel that there's a big shift. Also, I don't know if it's just in our sphere of these entrepreneurs who are starting to take charge and take ownership, but I definitely feel that as well. And basically, what happened for me is I think that there's information overload oftentimes on the internet, especially as you're like wanting to be an entrepreneur. You know, there's like, who do I follow? What do I do? Do I do Facebook? Do I do this? Do I do podcasting? You know, and like there's a lot of this mental game wanting to try to figure out how to do it through the mind. And basically my background is I'm a holistic nutritionist, and I've been a yoga teacher in the San Francisco Bay Area for the last several years. And I started feeling I was trying to do all of the different, strategies that we're supposed to do as entrepreneurs to try to get more clients and build your business. And
quote unquote supposed to do.
Yeah, exactly. And wow, if there's anything that any of the listeners get that right there, supposed to do, right? That's really the part of this. And so trying and burning out, kind of spinning my wheels, trying to figure out, do I follow this person? Do I do this strategy? This isn't working. Should I go here? You know, and in general, my business was going pretty well. But one thing that I had been noticing was that the majority of my clients were female. So whether I was running detoxes, online detoxes, or whether I was hosting, workshops in yoga spaces, or even my personal coaching through nutrition and mindfulness, it was primarily female. When I started to look at this, I started to really realize that there was a big imbalance, and I started to ask myself, where are the men? You know, men have bodies just similar to ours. You know, it's not that the women are more fragile or don't have their shit together any less. And I started to just kind of wonder, where are all the men? Where are the spaces for these men?
Mm-hmm.
And so it was in this deepening of my own thoughts and my own trying to understand where the imbalance was, that I started to ask my community and ask my friends around, who were men, why do you think the majority of people in these health practices? And I asked naturopathic doctors, I asked fellow nutritionists, I asked fellow coaches, and they all said, no, it's primarily women. And so with that knowledge, I had this big intuition or this big instinct that, I'm going to just start working for men. Because when I started to ask men in my community, hey, like, why do you think there's this imbalance? And it's because they've been told this story of, like, if you need to ask for help, you're weak, grow up, don't be a pussy. Like men are programmed that they need to be tough, they need to be strong, and they need to always have their shit together. And there's never really been a safe space for men to feel that they can go and feel supported and strengthened in their relationship and in whatever regards or aspect that's in. And so my big pivot was going from 70% of my clientele being women and saying, something's not right. I feel like there's something that I'm missing. Okay, I'm going to go specifically only work with men. And that was a huge shift for me and a huge leap of faith, because when 70% of your income is coming from women, to just kind of go in that direction. And it ended up being incredibly successful.
Wow. That is a massive, massive pivot, and one that takes a lot of fucking guts to actually act upon, right? Because we can have these downloads, we can have these ideas that come to us, that land, these dreams, these visions, whatever it is, the whispers, but to actually take action on that's the difficult part. It's easy to envision. It's tough to take action. And especially when, like you just said, was it 70% of your income? 70% of your income was coming from women. And you're an entrepreneur. And this is what you do for a living. And you're about to rip the carpet from underneath you to restart. So talk to us a little bit about that, because when you share a story like that, it's really easy to get wrapped up in and she just pivoted and everything was great. But like, what was actually going on behind the scenes when you started acting upon that vision of making that pivot in your business?
Oh my God, I was terrified. I was so terrified. Like, so here's the thing. What's interesting, Ruby, is about 3 years ago, I remember I've always been the one woman with like a bunch of guy friends, and I've always felt really called and resonating with men. And I remember sitting down with my best friend, who's a man, and I'm like, hey, like, you need to host men's circles. There needs to be more of this, and he was like, yeah, I know, it really needs to happen. And, 3 years went by, he still hadn't done it. And that was when I first got the call. And then basically I was sitting down with my coach, my mentor, and I was feeling this resistance, in some area or aspect of my business. And she was like, I think you're being asked to work with men and only men. And like, there was this, like, it was so interesting, because there was like this like pit in my stomach of like, huh, oh my God, did she really just say that? And then there was this like lightning rod that went up through the crown of my head of like, yes, that this is what you're supposed to be doing. And you've known for a while. It's now time. You're hearing an affirmation from an outside source. It's now time to make this pivot. And to be honest, like, hosting, first of all, as a woman hosting men's circles, that's really odd in and of itself. And it's really intimidating, like holding space for the masculine, right? Holding space for men who are truly the space holders in a lot of ways for our society, or have been for so long, and feeling as a woman that I'm being called to step into this place of strength and stability for our men to feel as though they can soften and relax and let go and be honest and authentic and vulnerable and share. It's incredibly intimidating. As a woman feeling the call to do this, not only is it against, what the society norm is, but it's also a really big space to fill. And I was really scared. And, at first I was kind of like, well, maybe I'll just like kind of start opening up to women. What if I serve both? What if I just really start speaking to the men, but I serve both? And she's like, look, Amanda, you can either be, do you want to be a big fish in a small pond, or do you want to be a small fish in a big pond? And when she said that, I was like, that makes a lot of sense. And why not just try it? Why not just try it? Because I really feel this heart space for the men out there, you know, especially with all this Me Too movement and everything else. The women are rising, and it's beautiful. And I really too believe that we can't forget about our men.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And to know it, I mean, because it really sounds like it was an innate knowing, like there was a knowing involved, to know that this is what you're meant to do, to also receive that message from someone outside of you. You know, what a powerful valid piece of validation. But again, like, to act on it, yes, terrifying as fuck. Like, I can't even imagine what that must have been like. And then there's like the actual mechanics of it, right? There's the actual, okay, now I have to change everything on my website. Now I have to change my copy. Now I have to change all this shit. There's so much more involved behind the scenes. And for those of you just listening and not watching the video, Amanda's smiling ear to ear about this. So, because it's
true.
a lot. And this is where I feel a lot of people get stuck, is they get these downloads, they understand that what they're doing no longer resonates or no longer aligns. But the thought of taking action on what they need to do to step into that next chapter can feel so overwhelming.
Mm.
And that overwhelm is what keeps people stuck doing what they're doing and not loving what they're doing, and knowing that they're not fully in their purpose. So talk to us a little bit about that, because there must have been a little overwhelm.
Oh God. Yeah. Like, not only like as a feminine energy choosing to hold space for the masculine energy, which is obviously overwhelming in and of itself, but then you're absolutely right. Like, how I was speaking, right? Who I was speaking to, I had to learn a whole different language, you know, like I literally I couldn't talk about feelings anymore. I couldn't talk about like, do you feel like, you know, overwhelmed, even something like that. That's not going to be a masculine thing. Like, are you stressed and burnt out? That's masculine. Like,
Right.
do you want to have more drive and more motivation in your life? That's masculine. Versus like, do you want to have more energy and feel good about your body? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it's a completely different, and like learning, I had to do a lot of, you know, asking people, asking friends, leaning on the community. Thankfully I have a lot of male friends, and even my visuals, you know, even like the images that I was using and for marketing, and like really like going into the masculine and asking my friends in my community, what's resonating with you, changing the colors on my business, but yet not wanting to change everything, because I still am a woman holding this space, you know, and I still do want this. It's really about connecting men to their yin, helping them reconnect with their feminine. So I don't want to be like super masculine, but yeah, I mean, the whole thing, I think getting help was a huge part. And really, that's what made me realize that it's all about surrender, right? If we could just learn to get out of our own way, if we could just learn to listen, to clear our channels, to listen and to trust, and in that trusting, just surrender, we will be provided with all of the tools. Like, all of the right people at the right time will come in, because we all want to support one another. We all want to help one another. And that's kind of how it is. I mean, even New Media Summit, that was like just another tool on the past. It was a casual conversation that I had with someone, and someone was like, wow, like your audience is a lot more on podcasting than they are on Facebook. And here's this great summit and you should go to it. And I have this ticket and I know this person. And so it's like, when you can just surrender to this crazy message, which doesn't make any sense. And I'll tell you, this has happened so many times in my life, in my professional life, in my personal life. Like, it doesn't make any sense, but yet it also makes all the sense that you could ever try to make of anything. And so just really surrendering and realizing that there's a lot of support when you lean into it, you know, and that's something you talk about a lot on your podcast, is leaning into it.
Yeah, it's so important. And I think it's also really important for our listeners to understand what surrender actually looks like in action. Because I think when people hear the word surrender, what comes up in their minds is inaction, when really surrender is an active state. So why don't you tell our listeners a little bit more about what surrender really means and what it really looks like?
Well, I love that you called that out. I love that you called that out and you named it. And of course you would, right? Because it's true. Like a lot of people think, oh, surrender, I'm just going to let go and not do anything. But it is an active state. Absolutely. You're constantly letting go. You think you've let go, and there's a little bit more than you can let go in. And this is in any aspect of our lives, whether we're in relationship or whether we're in business. And, the act of surrender is getting out of the way of your ego. Right? It's
Mm-hmm.
getting out of the way of your mind thinking that things need to be a certain way and they need to look a certain way. That's very masculine, right? Like we've
Mm-hmm.
been living in a masculine driven society, which is like make it make sense, logic, structure. And like that has been great because it's gotten us to where we are. But I think all of us here can pretty much understand that we are moving fast and we are moving in a different direction. And now there's this new energy that's arising, which is this feminine energy of really listening. It's not
Mm-hmm.
being passive. It's not letting things bulldoze over you, but it's like, I'm going to listen. I'm going to release. I'm going to let go and know that it was never about me, that it's never going to be about me, that if I can get out of the way of my own ego and truly allow myself to surrender to the path that's being laid before me, it's going to be so much easier for myself and every other person that I come into contact with. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that that's like the biggest key there. It's like, get out of your own way. Get out of your own way. Show up in the most authentic way possible in everything you do. Listen, because there are always signs around you. And I really feel that if you're in a place in your life where you're feeling a lot of resistance or something isn't working, that is your first clue that you are not surrendering, right? Surrender, when you surrender, life flows with effortless ease. And if you're in a place, whether it's a relationship or your business or any other aspect of your life where it's just feeling there's so much resistance, surrender and ask yourself, how can I let go? Yet that doesn't mean you give up, right? You're
Mm-hmm.
surrendering to listen to the guidance. And then once you get that sign, you walk in that direction. And I think that that's where I'm at right now. It's like people, what does it look like in 5 years? It's like, I never would have dreamed that as a little girl, I wasn't like, Mommy, I want to host men's circles,
Right.
like
Yeah.
never, ever. And so I have no idea what it looks like, but I'm continuing to listen. I'm continuing to surrender because I know that what my ego or my mind wants to think is what I'm supposed to be doing is far more complicated and probably way wrong. And I could just let go and be guided instead, and it'll be a lot easier.
Yeah. So I I always get a visual when I think of surrender and letting go. And I love that you say let go. Um, because it's like imagine holding on to like really heavy weights and you're trying to walk forward and it's tough. Well, surrender isn't like just to quit and stop right there. Surrender is like, well, let me see what I can let go of so I can continue moving forward. So let me let go of the weight in my left hand and see how far I get. And then maybe I'm going to let go of the weight in my right hand. And that's what surrender really looks like. So I love that you mentioned that. And that this has actually been a big process, big part of your pivoting process. Um, so let's talk about that ease that you mentioned, because a lot of people talk about ease and flow when you find your purpose or find the thing. And what I found personally is that shit doesn't get easier. um it just feels more ease filled. Like opportunities that are aligned will come my way, and sometimes I'll look at opportunities that come my way, and that'll actually help me really understand, am I on the right path or not on the right path? So explain the ease that you mentioned.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think that that's great. Having practiced yoga a long time and it being a part of my daily practice, although I don't practice as often like mat yoga,
Hmm.
that's a big part of it. People would ask me, like, does it ever get any easier? Right? Students would come up to me, does it ever get any easier? And it's like, well, no. And the reason why is because we're continuing to expand. Like it gets easier in a sense that it becomes more comfortable in a way. But if you're growing and if you're always evolving, you're always going to be meeting your next edge and your next edge and your next edge. But what happens is just like in the yoga, on the yoga mat, if you're doing asana, there's this flow of like one movement to the next. And you have this, it just becomes this rhythm, this dance with you and your breath and your body. And it's the same thing with life, right? When you're open and you're receptive and you're receiving, just like you said, you're no longer having to go out and get all the things. Oftentimes the things are coming to you, but it doesn't mean that you're just sitting back waiting.
Hmm.
You're actively being passive, right? You're actively putting out that intention, putting out that effort, putting into your sphere what it is that you are attracting. And in that conscious intent, therefore, that thing starts to attract to you. And was listening to an episode of yours not that long ago, and you were chatting with a woman, and she was sharing about the journaling, and how important journaling is, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it truly is. It's like when you are aligned, number one, you're clear in your mind, right? You have this clear vision. If you're unclear, things are going to be so rocky because you're not going to know what you want. The universe can't give you what you want if you don't have clarity,
Mm-hmm.
right? You have to have clarity. But then once you have that clarity, all of a sudden you're sending the right messages. You're speaking the right words to the right people. You're showing up for yourself in the right way. You're no longer self-sabotaging with old patterns and habits and limiting beliefs that no longer serve you. You have clarity. And in that clarity, things just start to kind of move in the right direction. And if at some point, which it always will, get a
Mm-hmm.
little bit hazy, that's your opportunity to check in and be like, oh yeah, okay, this is like, I'm feeling resistance. Oh, let me step back. Let me see what I can let go of, what weights are no longer serving me.
Mm-hmm.
And then maybe you pick up something different, or maybe you just keep walking. And it is a big difference. It doesn't get easier because your challenges as you grow, they also get larger. But then you look back at the trail behind you and you're like, wow, I've really been, I've been kicking some ass, and I've gone so far because I'm in alignment with my life's purpose, or I'm in alignment with myself or my higher self, which is truly, when you're connected to source, which is, where everything begins and ends.
Mm-hmm. What a beautiful way to put that. And um, it's so real when we talk in terms of resistance. Like, it's harder for people to understand flow, I feel like. But when we say the word resistance, they're like, oh, yeah, I know what that feels like. Well, flow is the opposite of that. So when you're in resistance, that's when it's a really good time to reflect and ask yourself, am I really where I need to be? Um, and even just the question, like, what can I let go of? So, Amanda, with your pivot, and saying basically goodbye to 70% of your income, how has that panned out for you?
So what's amazing, Ruby, is that when you let go and you fully surrender, things will happen so magically that you could have never even planned for. And I've known this because whenever I travel, that's what happens. It's like when you let go and you fully live in your heart space, like things, the best parts or the best aspects of your life will come towards you in ways that you could have never imagined. It didn't matter if you have the best funnel in the world and you spent however much money, trying to craft it, and, borrowed someone's list or whatever. It's like what happened when I pivoted was all this. It was surrender. I was like, I have no idea how I'm going to do this. I have no idea even where to begin. And I started doing a lot of meditating and listening to a lot of Abraham Hicks, and
Mm-hmm.
literally surrendering, literally stop doing the emails, stop reaching out, and laying on my back. And as an entrepreneur, and anybody else who's an entrepreneur knows that, like, that's one of the hardest things ever, is like
Mm-hmm.
stopping and doing nothing when your to-do list is never going to be done. And you're
Right.
like, oh my God, I can't just relax. And that's what I literally started doing. And it was one thing after another. Like, I had been I'm on a couple different, my website, also Facebook, but then also some other platforms that I'm on, one of them, which is Thumbtack. And randomly, a bunch more men, and I hadn't done anything to my Thumbtack, a
Mm-hmm.
bunch more men started reaching out and connecting with me. One of them even called and said, Amanda, this is right after I changed my website, right after I
Mm-hmm.
changed everything, the pictures and everything, and really crafted the message, literally sends me an email. I set up a call with him, and he said, I feel like you are the person that I've been waiting for.
Mm-hmm.
Everything about what your website is talking about, the mind, the body, the spirit, every aspect. He's like, I've dealt with a lot of trauma, a lot of past history. I've been holding on to a lot of things, and I'm ready to let go of it. And everything has spoke to me, and I want to work with you. My wife found you, and he was my ideal client, Ruby, my ideal client. I live in Santa Cruz, and Silicon Valley is just, 30 minutes over the hill. And my biggest dream is to really help, these high level tech people who are really oftentimes feeling isolated and lonely and disconnected from themselves, reconnect to themselves so that they can, number one, feel better, but also take this connection and this fulfillment and put it back into their work. And so that all of these platforms that we're on are truly a lot more about connection and depth. And he has been that person.
Mm-hmm.
He has a huge company, and now he's taking all of the practices that we're doing and applying them into his company. So now it's to his CEOs and his CFOs and all these people, it's trickling down. And so what happened was the fact that I let go all of a sudden I went from 70% women to 80% men, literally within
Mhm.
3 months, 80%
Wow.
men. And my ideal clients are coming to me. And I didn't go out and find them. I wasn't going over the hill. You know, I was previously, I was going over the hill and trying to network and do these things. I just let go. And
Mhm.
now all of a sudden they're coming to me and they're finding me. And so that's really what alignment is, right? Like when you are in alignment with your highest and best self and you are just truly listening, that's when that flow piece comes in. And I could have never, no matter how, I mean, maybe if I paid a bunch of money to have some marketer try to find them, but maybe they weren't even the most aligned clients,
Mhm.
you know? So
Yeah.
yeah, it's pretty powerful.
So business is good.
Business is good. Yeah. Business is good. And I honestly, for me personally, like one thing that I found out that I really love, I love working with men. And I'm sure you could maybe relate with this well, because men take action, right? Like I
Mhm.
tell them to do something. I'm like, okay, like here's what we're going to do. I'm not a therapist. I'm not a coach. I'm going to tell you what you're going to do. And I expect you to come back next week and you're going to do it.
Mhm.
And with women, what I found a lot of times we have so many more emotions and there's so many more things that are like preventing us. I'm like, so how did your 3 action items go? And they're like, well, you know, I did 1 and 2, but I really couldn't do 3, you know, with the men that I've been working, it's like, okay, cool. Yeah, I did it now. And I also, not only did I do these 3 things, but I also did like 4 more things. So like, I'm feeling
Mhm.
amazing. And it's like, wow, I feel so much more in alignment because I'm serving the right people that are ready to receive the messages that I have to get, you know?
Mm. Well, what it sounds like to me is that, and um you're in your element. And it sounds like working with women wasn't really your element. That wasn't what you're built to do. You can do it, but it's not what you're built to do. And now you're working in your element. And we all have our own element, and sometimes it takes working in the wrong elements for us to figure out what that is, you know? And
Mm-hmm.
what I love the most about you sharing this today is that I think from what I've seen and what I've experienced in even just like, say, the business coaching field where people are like coaching you on how to build your businesses, there's such a focus on your niche and finding your thing, and they fail to communicate the fact, because this is a fact, that your purpose is going to evolve, that your methods are going to evolve, that
Mm-hmm.
your audience is going to evolve, that you are going to evolve, that this evolution, and the evolution can happen as quickly as like a year or 6 months. And so I feel like entrepreneurs who work with people like this often feel shame or guilt when they're approached with these downloads and with these ideas and with these insights of like, this is not what I'm meant to do. I'm actually supposed to do this. Like they actually feel guilty or ashamed or overwhelmed because they've been taught to show up in their business a certain way, and it's very concrete when really it's not. It's fluid. And what you've shared here today is such a perfect example of really owning your evolution and bringing that evolution into your business, um, with courage, because that's really what it takes is a deep sense of courage, um, to not only make the changes, but to actually say to yourself, wow, I've evolved.
Yeah, and I love that you said that. And if there's any entrepreneur listening to this, I think that that nugget right there, that word of wisdom is that you're in a process and that you're evolving, and that as you evolve, so too is your niche. And like, I agree with you completely. We're so focused on these structure ideas of having to have things this way instead of realizing that like, wow, you are changing, and so too is what you're going to offer and how you're going to offer it, hopefully, because that's what, you know, growth and expansion is. And I do feel also there's a lot of shame around that. So thank you so much for calling that out and also for reflecting that as well, because I think that's super powerful for anyone. Don't ever feel shame. Listen to your intuitive guidance, you know, and it's so, so powerful.
Yeah, exactly. I love that. And listen to your inner guidance. I love that because I think we can't say it enough. We can't say it enough. Um, Amanda, if you were to leave everyone, all our listeners and viewers, with like one golden nugget, what would that be?
That's a great question. Um, my major thing would be to take time to listen. right? We are so busy, especially as entrepreneurs. We are so busy trying to do all the things because there's not enough time. And this is the thing, like you are your own best teacher, you're your own best guru, like all the things that you need are within you. But if you don't take the time and you don't create the space to listen without distractions from your community, from your spouse, from your whoever, your business world, you will never be able to hear the messages that are being spoken. And so take time to yourself to do nothing, to sit, whether you want to call it meditation or mindfulness or journaling, just take time to yourself. And then you will be able to receive whatever it is that you're being asked to step forth into.
I love that. Create space for listening. That's
Yeah.
honestly, that was my theme for 2018. So let me tell you, listeners, it really fucking works. It can change your life. My dad always used to say, Ruby, you have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. Right? Mic drop, Dad. Mic drop.
This one's to you, Dad. Thank you.
Yes. Amanda, thank you so much for being here with me today and sharing this part of your journey, which I'm just so excited for you to see how this continues to evolve. Why don't you tell our listeners where they can stalk you online?
Online stock, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
That's a thing. Now we can just call it out. Let's just name
We're just going to
it.
be real about it.
Awesome. So I'm really active on Facebook. You can find me at Amanda Biccum, Biccum. I also have my website, amandabiccum.com. And then recently I relaunched a podcast, which is called Driven for Purpose, Reconnecting Mankind. So that's another place you can find me as well.
Awesome. Well, I'll have all those links in the show notes. Amanda, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate you and I honor you for the journey that you've been on.
Thank you for being an inspiring woman who is helping entrepreneurs navigate this murky, often messy path. If I had only heard about you and the wisdom that you've been sharing so long ago, maybe my path would have been a little bit more clear in the beginning.
Or maybe it would have been exactly the same because that is exactly what you needed.
Yeah, there you go. Aha, thank you, sister.
To our listeners, thank you so much for joining us on today's Thought Leader, where I'm challenging you to rise up, speak up, and create a movement. I would love for you to check out my free online training at rubyfremont.com/CPR. Be sure to drop a rating and review on iTunes. And if you have any questions for me or Amanda, please reach out to us on social media. This episode was sponsored by the Mayfair Hotel and Eve American Bistro. I will see you back here next week for a brand new episode of today's Thought Leader.